decided to have a talk about my thoughts on storylines as I make coffee and unload the dishwasher. So instead of like filming, like I did like a big chore, like hanging up laundry video, but honestly, I'm still gonna do live streams. I was just thinking maybe I'll do more on this other channel than on the hair channel because hey, let's get the viewership up on this channel. So I decided I wanted to talk about storylines because sometimes when you're doing live streams, you don't really get to say everything you want to say, like when it's a big conversation about your thoughts on storylines. Like, okay, so yeah, I have some really strong opinions on storylines. I just sometimes like in a group setting, I don't really get to say everything I think about it because I don't know. I don't always agree with what other people say on it, so this is going to be my opinion. So on the Friday night live stream, I haven't seen the show that we were reviewing, but my honest opinion is that I don't always think every storyline has like. I don't think every storyline is written that way. I think some like people look at storylines that way. They're going to look for that, but I don't. Storyline is produced that way. Just like not everything has a concrete reason. I know some people believe everything has a reason, but I kind of don't agree with that 100% either because sometimes some things are just random. Like if we say everything has a reason, some people justify that in some religions to say, well, that could be why some people died and some people were killed. No, not everything has a reason because look, there might be a scientific explanation for something, but I don't think there's always a reason. Many things in life are just random and you can't replicate everything. Like you can try and figure out why this one thing is more popular or more interesting. Not everything has a reason. For instance, there could be a hurricane and there might be a scientific explanation for why that happened, but there isn't a logical like reason for every single thing. And I think sometimes people that are a little too science-based, they get too caught up in the logical aspect of it, whereas I like more intuitive. And I feel like us intuitive people, like we kind of have to stand up a bit and just speak out on this because sometimes you have to follow your intuition. And actually, the science community doesn't really they kind of like, I was trying to figure out why is it that I'm getting recommended like things that I'm not interested in, like tarot reading. I'm not interested in tarot reading or Wicca, but I do kind of buy that there are certain things we can't explain in this universe. Like some people think there's a tidy explanation for everything, but not for everything. Because sometimes I have intuitive experiences, like that I can't really explain why. Like I'll be thinking about something. Like I called my sister last Sunday and I said, hey, we should maybe go to the casino. That might be fun because I was just kind of thinking about it. And she said, oh my gosh, I'm at the casino with my boyfriend. And she goes, let's go to Morongo next weekend, which was yesterday. We actually went, but that was weird. Like, how did I know? Like, what made me call her? Like, sometimes I'll just be thinking about a friend, and I just have these intuitive feelings, or I see something before it happens. But in the scientific community, sometimes they'll try to explain this, but they don't have an explanation for everything actually. Because in fact, there's this article that says in Psychology Science, it says, but scientists have trouble finding quantifiable evidence that intuition actually exists. They might look into it, like some researchers have. Now, a team of researchers from the University of New South Wales has come up with a novel technique of demonstrating how much unconscious intuition can inform and even improve our decision making. So they're looking into it, and there have been a few studies on it, and like here in the Scientific American. But I think there are just certain things. I mean, you can look into it, you can look into the science of it, but we need to have a conversation about the other side as people that are more like less logic based, because some things are logical, but I don't like logic 100%. Like, I think it has to be like maybe more intuition, more emotion than logic in life. Like, I'm more about the emotions and the feelings and the logic. But you can't really have like these concrete conversations with science people. So here's my thing. How does a story affect the people who watch it? How does the story affect the people who read it? Like, so we can try to have like grandiose thoughts. And I know that's cool when people try and look into it, but I'm more of a like emotional kind of person. And as emotional, people need to stand up like and be more fiery about it, I feel. Because I feel like the logical people kind of control the conversation a bit. And this is where I take it back. I say, I don't think everything's based on logic. I don't think everything's based on a tidy explanation. Because look, even the major religions used to be like, this is the tidy explanation for everything. And these people deserve to die in a natural disaster because they weren't believers. There were literally people that would try and justify that in religion. And now I feel like some people use science to that and in varying degrees. Like when people start talking about science and it gets kind of like, oh, well, there has to be a concrete answer for everything. Yes, I get we need science in the world, but we also need intuition and we need emotion and things that scientific people don't really 100% understand. Like they're not going to be 100% in touch with people that have an emotional response to a storyline or anything really. And not everybody's always looking for like the grandiose message in a storyline. Like for me, I want to be real deal here. Like, you know how I am. I get a little snarky sometimes, I guess, in like the comments with you guys. Like if I don't like something, I'm real deal and I'm going to tell you what I think. So this is my opinion on storylines. I don't look for like the deeper meaning of what the writers thought in the story. If I like a story, I like it because I had like an emotional response to it. Like there was something that emotionally clicked for me. Like, I don't know, like when I started reading about Harem Sultan and the harem, I just thought that was interesting how fiery she was and her like standing up for herself and wanting to prove her love to Suleiman. Like that was the part that really touched me. And even though the story is not 100% historically accurate, I kind of like shows like that. I like shows that have some dramatization. I like shows with some emotion. I like beautiful costume. Not everything has to have this deep scientific meaning for me. Like, so yeah, I don't look for that. I don't really care, to be honest with you. Like if there's a clear-cut storyline or any clear-cut grandiose meaning behind the story, because that's not what I get from it at all. What I get from it is, do I enjoy the writing? Oh, the emotions. Like some people hate crying scenes, but I kind of like them because I'm not afraid to cry. This is another thing too. Our society is so weird. Like they're afraid if you cry, like you will look less masculine. But I don't know. I feel like are the Turkish people and maybe the Iranian people more in touch with their emotions? Because like in Iran or in Turkey, if a man cries, it's not like shameful. But like in America, I don't know, especially if you had Midwestern parents, they never wanted you like to cry, to show like crying. Like people thought that was weakness. But I clash against that. And I say it's not weakness, because I feel like people who sometimes cry, who show emotion, that's okay, because we have like this whole, like, let's be like very straight-laced. Let's always like be logical. Don't show any emotion. Don't show any feeling about anything. I don't agree with that whole mindset. Like, I don't. And I feel like, Mediterranean cultures, like, they're not as weird about it. Like, a man crying, like, showing emotion, like, over somebody dying, they're not like, oh my God, he cried. How weak that looks. Like, no, actually, it looks stronger because they're sometimes in touch with their emotions. And irony is, like, Middle Eastern people were really good at science and math, but I feel like there's an emotional component sometimes that is lost in the storyline. And if I emotionally connect with a story, that's when I get it. That's when I like it. If I don't emotionally connect with a story, then I don't really have much interest in it beyond that. Like my feelings, like that's when I look at a storyline, how I feel is, do I emotionally resonate with the plot? Like, is it driving me forward to want to keep seeing what happens to the character? Is there someone in the story that it's not exactly empathy, but I can just kind of feel that I have, like, I might not even agree with them on anything, but is there something that they're going through that I can feel for them? And that's going to drive me forward to want to keep reading that story, you know? That's how, I think us emotionally driven people, we don't look for, like, the more grandiose meaning or the morality behind the story. We look for the emotions behind the story. And why do I like the story of Suleiman? Oh, his poetry is just so beautiful. Like, he wrote the most beautiful poetry. And it's the story, the love story between him and Harem, and just how, like, he kind of did what was impossible. Like, basically, they said back then, for 200 years they decided that the sultan shouldn't marry women. They should just, sire different men, not different men, different sons with different women in the harem. And for Harem Sultan, like, there was just something about her. There was this magnetic connection. And I felt that in my life on some occasions where I had like this magnetic connection with someone. Sometimes it was misplaced. It didn't work out the way I had hoped, but I still had that feeling. And I don't know, sometimes when I get that feeling, I go with my feelings a lot. Some people, the logical crowd doesn't like that. But I don't know why. They're just so anti going with your feelings on things, going with your intuition on things. And I'm going to talk about that. I feel like the logical crowd does look down on emotions to some degree. I know some of them say, well, they will use their emotions to like surpass the logic. But sometimes I feel like they don't understand certain emotional resonances that people have with storylines. They just don't get it because they don't think that way. So if you're more like intuitive, more emotional, like I try to be logical, but I don't claim to be a logical person. And that's okay because I feel like it's kind of overrated in a way. Like I get kind of tired of it. So yeah, when it comes to storylines, how I feel about a storyline is this. I feel like, do the characters resonate with you? Do you like them? Like, can you connect with them on some level? Like, okay, even though Magnificent Century is highly fictionalized, you really, like me, in my case, I end up really loving the character Mustafa because he's just, and I think this part is actually based in history. He actually understands that his mother was a slave, just like, his future concubines are. Like, he knows that they came from somewhere else. Like, he actually, like, we don't have documented case that he actually asked one of them, like Fatima, what her real name was, but in the story he actually asked her, and he asked her if she's a Croat. Whereas Suleiman the Magnificent, he didn't really care that Harem had been Russian. Like, he didn't care. When she wanted to become a Muslim and adopt Ottoman culture, he was just really happy about it. Whereas Mustafa seemed more in touch. Like, he was just a very like tender soul. Like, he was a very emotional person. And there's another fictional storyline in there, which probably didn't happen, where he falls in love with a Greek Ottoman girl and he brings her into the harem. But that's actually like one of the most beautiful scenes because it's just so emotional. And he's out in the forest and he's wearing like disguise. I actually like those scenes where both Suleiman and Mustafa dress up as commoners and they go out to see what the people in the city think. It's pretty funny. Or in the countryside. I really like those scenes. So, yeah. But a lot of people that watch this series, I guess there's this whole divide, like Harem versus Mahdivaran. And since Mahdivaran was the first love of the Sultan, they hate anything, even though it's all fictionalized, right? But it just shows you how emotional people get about storylines. And yes, emotions do drive a lot of us. Like, a lot of us, the reason we want to keep watching a show or we're invested in a show is because of emotions. Like, if I have an emotional connection to a show, I will keep watching it. If I don't, like, if there's a show that I saw in the past and I just don't have any interest in it, I won't watch it. Or, like, look, I'll be happy for people who like it, but I'm just so, like, out there about what I like. It's so rare that I like a show these days. Like, what show do I really like? I like Magnificent Century right now. I think I might start watching Kazam, maybe. But I find that I keep wanting to watch that show than do other things that I should be doing. And I'm like, that's because it's, like, emotionally connecting with me. Even though I've read the history and I know, yes, it deviated. And some people get really mad. But the way I look at it is it's like a telenovela of Turkish style. It's kind of like that. It's emotions. It's kind of fiction. I don't need it to be 100% accurate because if it is, I can just read the book about Harem Sultan if I want the history. That's what I could do. So, yeah. I look for, like, is it really good acting? And one thing I really like about Turkish actors is they show their emotions. They're not afraid to cry. Sometimes the women kind of do what would be considered just so, oh my gosh, like heresy in the U.S. Like, they might sometimes get really mad at people. And I'm not saying that screaming is good. Some of those scenes get a little overblown. I don't love that. But they show emotions. Like, I feel like American actors, they might cry sometimes, but it never feels legitimate. Like, there's just something when I watch the Turkish actors, it feels real, okay? So I connect with storylines on an emotional level. I look for the emotions in the story. Does the writing touch me? Do I find something beautiful in it? Like, intuitively, does it make me, like, I make a connection from it to something else I read? Does it feel familiar but yet new? Does that make sense? I don't know. Does it feel familiar yet new? Those are the things that resonate with me. So right now I'm still watching Magnificent Century. I stopped for a while because it's quite the Odyssey, reading it in Turkish. You have to translate the whole thing. And yeah, it's a lot of work. So a lot of people are like, they don't want to do the work of reading all those captions. And I will, because I like it. And it's one of the few shows I actually want to watch right now. After I'm done, like I'm saying, I might read Cosm, but I don't know if I will, because honestly, when I have free time, I just work on my YouTube channel. So, as for my YouTube channel, like what I'm doing right now, that's very intuitive too. Like everything's intuitive at the moment for me. Like, does it feel right? Is this something I want to do? Does this feel good? Like, look, in the past, I'd be like, well, should I do this? Should I do this? Well, I'm kind of looking at what a couple of like trending channels are doing it, but they're doing it in their own way. And that's just kind of what I'm doing. Like some people, they have like this extreme formula, like we're going to do this, but I'm not going to do that because I think you might just get disappointed. So look, intuitively, does it feel good? Like, does it feel good to do this thing? Like, you know, I've always been deep on my intuitions, and then recently I thought, do I regret like liking certain people? Do I regret like making this decision in life? No, because at the time it felt right. And I feel like if we do everything logically, we're always following the logic on things. I feel like life is not as beautiful, is not as visceral, it's not as exciting. Like I love the intuitive, emotional side of life, the side that's kind of less logical. Maybe logic's overrated. Thumb this up if you think logic's overrated. I kind of do. Like, I'm not a big logic person. I just feel like everybody talks about logic, like logically this, logically that. And we live in a society where we have to live by a clock and be very logical. And I've done that for years. But sometimes you can't explain everything, okay? Like natural disaster. You might have maybe you can explain it, but there isn't always an explanation in advance. And we can go back in time and say, oh, well, the pressure. I just don't think everything is highly explainable. Sometimes something just took off because it did. You can predict things. But look, even if we say people predict like certain shows and ads did well, later on, the test might have said, oh, this is going to do well, and then it flops. And then there's certain shows that people hated and ended up later it turned around. So you can't always have a logical explanation for everything. So yeah, sometimes if you're willing to like say logic doesn't explain everything, I think that's where us emotional people come in, right? We're the emotionally driven ones. Like, I love emotion. Like, so today I'm just gonna say, like, my whole channel, like, I don't pretend to live some logical life or try to find the logical explanation or the more lofty explanation for everything. And that doesn't mean it's less intellectually rigorous either. Because I actually think like intuitive, like literature that's based on emotion and feeling is like very intellectually rigorous, just in a different kind of way. I mean, they do try to scientifically investigate like why intuition works over logic. But they don't have an answer for it, do they? Have you noticed there's no answer for it yet? Why is that? Because not everything can be explained, and we are never going to understand everything that happens in life. Like there are some scientific explanations for like how the earth was created. I don't believe I'm sorry, I don't believe like some weird fable on that. Like there is scientific things for like how humans came into existence and all that. I agree more with the scientific explanation on that. But with other things, you can't explain everything, okay? And you can try, but if you can't replicate it, what is it going to do for us? That's my thing. Like, if it's not something that you can replicate, and then I feel like that's where emotion comes in and kind of that whole idea of, like, Sufi acceptance, like being in touch with your intuition. that, you accept that some things happen and you don't have control over everything. The less control you have, the better life is, I think. Actually, I'm kind of at a point I want to have less control over my life. I don't want to know every single thing that's going to happen. I don't want to predict everything. Like, even though sometimes my intuition will tell me that what things are going to happen, I just don't want to be like living some life like where I'm always trying to figure out, like, I have plans and ideas, but some people get really disappointed. And I used to disappoint myself too, like when I'd be like, well, this is going to happen. If it doesn't happen, maybe something else was bound to happen, and we don't always have a way of predicting. We might have intuition about what we can follow. So my plan is for my channels is this. Well, I'm going to buy some new silverware soon. That's one plan I have. That's really nothing to do with this topic. But what I want to do in the near future is I would like to actually, just do more things that I think are fun every day. And you can come along on the journey of what I'm doing today. And it doesn't have to be like logically explained to you. Do you like emotions? Do you like more visceral experience? Like, if you notice, like, I like to do art, but just in a more of an emotional kind of way. I was always so taught, like, this whole Midwestern mindset. Like, you can't show your emotions. Like, don't cry ever. Like, crying is weak. Like, if you showed, like, any emotions, and some people still believe that right now, crying is weak. I don't believe that. And I think it's weird. Like, if I see somebody cry, I don't think they're weak. I think it's very weird. We live in this highly logical society that if you show any emotion, how dare you? Except for, like, positive ones. Like, oh my gosh, you show a positive emotion, that's good. But, like, anytime anybody was down or sad, but yet here we have Iranians and Turkish people, and the men, like, they will sometimes cry if they meet like a leader and they're so happy, like they will cry tears, and they're very masculine men, and they're not like, oh my God, like I shed my tears. But I don't know, it's just something about, I don't know if it's just an Anglo-Saxon Protestant thing that got handed down, like in a lot of Midwestern type cultures. Well, even in California too, I think people get kind of weird about it. Like, oh my God, you showed some emotion and you cried. So I feel like it's kind of a weakness on your part if tears bother you, because I think you just can't handle emotion. Like, you like think logically that this makes sense. Like, why would somebody be upset about it? Well, not everybody's hardwired like you. Okay. There are a myriad of like reactions and experiences. So if I see somebody cry, I'm not going to lose it. Like, some people literally lose it because seeing someone cry makes them feel more uncomfortable than the person crying. Whereas the person crying will probably feel better. I'm not saying in every case, but sometimes people just need that release. And I think it's so unhealthy that we act like people shouldn't cry sometimes or have any emotions. Whereas Turkish shows don't seem to have that problem. Maybe that's why they emotionally resonate with me better. And I think I just love the emotional resonance of storylines over like finding like loftier explanations or like trying to figure out what the storytellers were trying to say or their morality, because I don't really care. I don't care what their morality is. I don't care about any of that. I never have. I don't care if they have a clear-cut storyline. Not all storylines are clear-cut, believe me. I've seen a lot of things that, I don't know, the writers probably debated what they were going to write. So I don't make the assumption everything is. I know some people feel that it is. I don't. But that's where I get kind of strong cookie, and I talk about it on my own channel because, yeah, I need to be able to say that, like, because it's been on my mind. So I wanted to make a video about it. So those are my thoughts on storylines. I think I prefer an emotionally charged storyline that resonates with me over something that's like too logical. I'm not the biggest fan of logic. Have you ever noticed? Like, look, logic has its time and place, but I think logic is kind of it's given more clout than it should deserve at times. I feel like sometimes that's not always the most the best thing in the world. Like, people think if you look for the logical explanation for everything, that it makes more sense. No, it doesn't. Not everything has a reason. If you try to explain everything or look for the reason for everything, I feel like you don't enjoy the organic experience of life. But this is me, like the intuitive, emotional side of myself, being kind of real deal with you. If you don't like that, I don't know what to tell you, but that's my thought on it. Thanks for watching.